Hello guys, welcome back to our anime moments. Today is explanation of upcoming episode Throne of Steel based on novel. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. So let's start. Even from such a distance, Long Hao-chen could faintly feel that the energy surrounding Bao felt just like that of someone about to use a forbidden spell. That orange demon spell seemed to resist its activation, as if it wanted to reverse the situation on the battlefield. But at that time, signs of dispute seemed to appear between the two demons. This is abnormal. If Bao is the prince of the devil dragons, would his words really get refuted? Unless, be careful, they are probably trying to break the restrictions of the illusory paradise. Long Hao-chen said hastily. Right at that time, that demon mage was finally persuaded by Bao, returning its attention back to the battle. Now, an orange radiance was released from their bodies. That orange color wasn't really intense, but it was strong enough to give a strange feeling. The breath of life seemed to freeze phased by the appearance of that orange color. More astonishing, this radiance looked like its strength didn't exceed the 10,000 units of spiritual energy. How could this happen? Both Long Hao-chen and Yi Xiaolei seemed at a loss. They had felt the pressure of this orange radiance before, but how was it that it still remained within the scope of the restriction? Zhong Fangfang suddenly said, "A star demon. That person is probably a star demon. Be careful, he is using the technique of great prophecy." Hearing the words great prophecy, huge changes immediately appeared on Long Hao-chen's face. The technique of great prophecy was a powerful magic specific to the Star Clan, which only the Star Demon God's direct lineage was able to use. It came with a compensation so high that even the Star Demon God himself had to pay with a part of his life essence to use it. But without the support from the Demon God pillar, using the technique of great prophecy would cost the user his life. The technique of great prophecy didn't really belong to the magic category, but couldn't really be rated otherwise either. It could instead be called a godly technique. Would the use of this technique enable him to avoid breaking the rules of this place? Right at that time, Yi Xiaolei suddenly shivered at Long Hao-chen's side. Immediately afterwards, the multicolored glow from her became more intense, and a tyrannical breath of life was emitted from her, spreading in every direction. At that time, Long Hao-chen's group of 8 noticed with astonishment that their own spiritual energy was instantly strengthened. This wasn't a simple restoration of spiritual energy, but their spiritual energy was just increasing in the same way as if they were cultivating. Long Hao-chen, Kia, and Zhong Fangfang were better off, and the 3 of them felt with a nice surprise an increase of their own strength at a rate of 10 units of spiritual energy per second. In a few seconds, their spiritual energy had already risen hundreds of units. But the other 5 felt totally different. Lin Xin, Wang Yuan, Simas Yan, Han Yu and Chen Yinga were currently at the peak of the 5th step, and this sudden increase of spiritual energy caused them to feel that the bottleneck that had been limiting them was being shaken. As intelligent people, how could they not grasp such an opportunity? Immediately rushing their spiritual energy, they made an all-out effort to break through. The breath of life released from Yi Xiaolei wasn't only powerful, but also gentle, and was easily accepted by any existence of a different attribute than death and darkness. Absorbing such a massive breath of life was the same as absorbing an elixir, causing an instant burst in strength. Even to a powerhouse such as Bao, resisting this would take some time and effort. Without a doubt, Yi Xiaolei started to go all out after sensing the crisis. However, on the other side, that orange light also looked increasingly intense, and in the sky, a large orange star-shaped pattern appeared, carrying intense and strong glitters of stars. Every time it glittered in the sky, Yi Xiaolei's face would look somewhat paler. Long Hao-chen, this technique of great prophecy is sealing me. The seal will last for an hour. Protect me just for this hour. When I throw it off again, they will all die. Yi Xiaolei's frail and childish voice was filled with rage and determination, but she slowly sat in a cross-legged fashion, placed her palms together on her chest and shut her eyes. At that time, the breath of life from her increased several-fold, turning into the shape of a green ring of light spreading onwards. A sort of moaning sound came out from Lin Xin, Wang Yuan, Simas Yan, Chen Yinga, and Han Yu, and pairs of spiritual wings extended from the 5 of them for the first time. This was the crucial time of their breakthrough, the opening of their spiritual cavities. The gift Yi Xiaolei offered them was invaluable, helping the 5 of them to break through the bottleneck of the 6th step. If they had cultivated normally, even several more months wouldn't necessarily have been enough for them to accomplish this. However, at the time she released the green ring of light, Yi Xiaolei's body was surrounded by an orange light, sealing her inside and stopping all the aura from surging out. The technique of great prophecy was an extremely powerful godly technique, of incredible and various uses. With such immense compensation cost, how could its power be lacking? Simply said, if it was used on an ordinary person, and if the chosen prophecy was death, it would just cause immediate death. But Yi Xiaolei was not an ordinary person. At that time, even the technique of great prophecy used on her could only temporarily seal her and nothing more. At the same moment the seal closed, a loud bang suddenly erupted on the demon that used the technique of great prophecy, echoing in the air. As a rain of blood splattered in the air, dozens of magical beasts rushed forward like arrows. This was the great cost that came with the technique of great prophecy. However, relying on it could undoubtedly change the whole situation on the battlefield. Along with his death, 2 soft spiritual stoves as well as an orange crown of heritage were set free. It was clearly the sign of his status as a star demon as well as his weeps from this travel to the illusory paradise. Arbao's face became grave and stern, but this was absolutely not because he was moved by his comrade's death. It was by swearing an oath that he had gotten this ally to use the technique of great prophecy at the crucial time. Although the cost they paid was considerable, if they managed to obtain Yi Xiaolei that stood on top of the mountain, it would have been worth it. It was not just him, but even the demon god emperor would covet Yi Xiaolei. The demons didn't spare any cost to attack the southern city's mountain pass, also devoting a lot on this trade with the Temple Alliance. For them to dispatch 10 demons to enter the illusory paradise, there had only been one goal, and that was Yi Xiaolei. The Temple Alliance's side believed themselves to have the advantage in this trade, but they didn't know that Yi Xiaolei was of utter importance to the demons, and particularly to the demon god emperor. However, this secret was only known to the demon god emperor and Arbao, who shared a father and son relationship. Having lost Yi Xiaolei's lead, the magical beast's attack became frantic. Filled with wrath, they initiated mad attacks at the demons. Although they contained a great level of strength, after the loss of their coordination, their efforts became fruitless. A purple glow was released from Arbao's eyes, enveloping the 7 of them in its range, and all of the group was immediately surrounded by a purple-black haze. However, no matter whether it was in terms of attack or defense, they immediately reached their peak condition, and started to do carnage. The magical beasts that came in contact with Arbao's powerful limbs became unceasingly torn to shreds, and from his chest emerged a black longsword, which wasn't grasped in his hand, but autonomously launched attacks while floating in the air. With every attack from it, a magical beast would be killed. This great might became the vanguard of their attack, until reaching the hillside. At this point, all that was left were the limbs and corpses of the magical beasts. Long Haochen and his group stood motionlessly on the hilltop. Zhong Fangfang looked at Long Haochen with some anxiety, but didn't say anything. The current Long Haochen had a very serious face, but still looked unflustered, not showing any signs of acting. The battlefield underneath was in total disarray, and the group of 8 demons started to make a breakthrough, but Long Haochen couldn't act yet. 5 of them still needed time to adapt to the changes after their breakthrough, having gained the boost from the spiritual cavities and the spiritual wings. And furthermore, given how frantic the situation below was, even if they joined, they couldn't do very much. Because of Yi Xiaolei's sealing, the magical beast were totally out of their minds with rage. Joining the melee could even be regarded as an enemy attack by them. The breath of life released by Yi Xiaomo had caused a good increase to their total amount of spiritual energy, in addition to having helped Lin Xin and the other 4 to break through to the 6th step. Now they had to return this gift. And furthermore, even if not for that, Long Haochen would still give priority to the protection of his comrades. He had made his preparations well, and if things didn't go as planned, he would bring Yi Xiaolei along with them to the Tower of Eternity. Long Haochen turned his head to look at Zhong Fangfang, telling him in a serious tone, "Brother Zhong, if things don't go well, just activate the illusory gem and leave. We have our own ways to return." Zhong Fangfang nodded in response. Seeing Long Haochen, he understood that this young captain had a card up his sleeve, and had at least an escape plan ready. This was related to the other party's secrets, so he naturally didn't ask. Seeing the battlefield below, Long Houchen's expression was severe. After all, the magical beasts in the illusory paradise gained a burst of strength from Yi Xiaolei's boost, a group of them reaching the 8th rank, which was approximately equivalent to the strength of human powerhouses of the 7th step. Although they were mostly acting out of instinct, these hundreds of magical beasts were up against a group of 8, surrounding them and attacking fiercely. But even in those circumstances, the battle went as a one-sided carnage. Of the 8 demons, Arbao was in the middle and his fighting style was simple and straight. The attacks of the magical beasts were totally useless against him, and he didn't avoid any, just launching his own attacks against them. All the magical beasts in front of him would hardly escape the fate of being torn to shreds. At the same time, he relied on his own strength to block the overwhelming majority of the attacks directed at him, playing the equivalent role as Long Houchen's in his team. At his side were 2 sturdy demons, resembling one another, but they didn't have human appearance. From afar, they looked like earth dragons, but with smaller builds, only reaching 2.5 meters in size, with long tail behind their back. However, the difference in build didn't mean they were any weaker than earth dragons in strength. In the opposite, their purely offensive combat methods were actually not that much inferior to Arbao. Their sturdy forearms and their horn forming an obtuse angle were life-destroying weapons, while their black scales gave them an extreme defensive strength. Just by themselves, the 3 of them stopped all the attacks directed to their group. In the rear of the group of 8 were 3 other close-quarter warriors, among which Leng Xiao acted as the core. At the 2 at the sides of Leng Xiao were demons issued from variations of magical beasts. The first had an imposing build, appearing like a giant bear. From his body, deep yellow light was continuously released. At every rush from the magical beasts, he would energetically stamp on the ground, launching intense shocking surges of energy, causing even large areas of cracks to appear on the ground. On Leng Xiao's other side was a lion-shaped powerhouse with a human body, also extremely tough in strength. Yu Yi and another female mage were positioned between these 2 subgroups, releasing their magic from there. Although the core of the entire team was Arbao, its conductor was Yu Yi. The staff in her hands was exchanged for a deep purple one, and intense surges of magic spread continuously from it, giving the other demons a magic boost while healing them. The other demon female at her side was clad in red, looking the same as a human, with the exception that her temper was a lot more fiery. Her figure was quite something, particularly her watermelon-like chest, combined with her slim waist and her rising butt. This figure reached a level a human wouldn't possibly be able to reach. On her hand were 2 coral-shaped staves, shaking in the air, and dark red glows were continuously shot from it. All the magical beast victims of her attacks were pulverized with an extremely great power, and all she used were single-target attacks. No large-scale attacks were launched by her. The level of coordination these 8 achieved could definitely not be called perfect, and obviously, it hadn't been for a long time since that they formed a team. However, under Yu Yi's lead, they didn't have any loophole. But even if there was, their overwhelming dominance in strength would be enough to make up for that. After this short observation, Long Houchen discovered their secret. In fact, with the exception of Yu Yi and that red-clad red-haired girl whose identity was unclear, the other demons definitely reached a phenomenal level of external spiritual energy, reducing all of the magical beasts into a disadvantageous position. After the loss of Yi Xiaolei's lead, the attacks from the magical beasts gradually became more and more chaotic. This lump of frantic attacks lost all discipline, and without a brain to lead the armies, they ended up only being pushed by these 8 demons. No matter how berserk their attacks were, they were still unable to stop the advance of the group of demons. Long Houchen was standing on the mountain top, still motionless, only occasionally looking at Yu Yi. If he could command the magical beast, perhaps they could still stop the enemies like they did before, but he couldn't. All he could do now was to rely on the terrain to try to stall for time. An hour was a very long period of time, and under the influence of Arbao's spell, these demon powerhouses didn't feel the least exhausted, pushing forward every second. Every step they took forward, quite a few magical beasts' blood and internal organs would scatter in the air. After the sealing of Yi Xiaolei by the Great Prophecy technique, the reinforcements of magical beasts surging from all directions lessened. This was another piece of bad news. Kia calmly joined Long Houchen's side, telling him in low voice, "Should this be done?" Although she didn't put it clearly in words, Long Hao-chen understood what she meant and lightly shook his head in response. "Now is not the time yet." Kia lowered her head and didn't say anything more. Long Hao-chen turned back to Han Yu, doing a hand gesture to him. Han Yu immediately understood his meaning and joined his side, stating the chant of a slow incantation. Meanwhile, Yating, who was behind Long Hao-chen, also started to chant. At this moment, the group of 8 demons was gradually closing the distance between the hilltop. Of course, as they advanced, the attacks of the magical beast became even more frantic. With the rise of the danger facing Yi Xiaolei, they wouldn't shrink even if they had to sacrifice their own lives. A faint mantle of light spread from the mountain, shrouding the battlefield. Getting moisturized by this golden light, the injuries sustained by the magical beasts were immediately healed to a certain extent, and their power increased to some extent. Immediately, another even more intense surge of light was sprinkled, and even more magical beasts were healed to an even greater extent. This sudden boost and recovery made the group of magical beasts even more ferocious, bringing the rush of the group of 8 demons to a stop. These 2 spells naturally came from Long Hao-chen and Han Yu. Although Long Hao-chen wasn't capable of using large-scale healing magic, Yating could. Although she couldn't directly use magic by herself, she transmitted the spell to Long Hao-chen after completing its incantation. Ever since they met Yi Xiaolei, it seemed as if they had become a part of the illusory paradise, obtaining the full support from the latter. In these circumstances, everyone recovered their spiritual energy at a greatly accelerated speed. Long Hao-chen turned around, calling Chen Yinga to join him and mumbling something in her ears. After staying sluggish for a short time, Chen Yinga nodded in response. The look she gave Long Hao-chen suddenly became quite different. Sima Xian and Wang Yuanyuan were already at either side of Long Hao-chen, prepared well. It seemed that the enemies were now only at a distance of 100 meters, but this could be covered in a few dashes by a powerhouse. Healing spells started to emanate unceasingly from the mountain, and the magical beasts receiving its effects didn't only recover from their injuries, but also calmed down from their frenetic state. To them, the fact that healing magic was released from the top of the mountain implied that Yi Xiaolei was all right. And so long as they could maintain their own judgment, the powerhouses before them were nothing to fear. Long Hao-chen told Yating, "Use the language they can understand to tell them that Yi Xiaolei is only temporarily sealed, and will need some time to liberate herself. We'll need to delay the enemy for at least an hour." Yating nodded lightly, flying in front of Long Hao-chen and grumbling some words. Under the effects of the light essence, her voice was spread afar. Hearing Yating's voice, the group of magical beasts immediately burst out in utter rage. The fact that Yi Xiaolei had been sealed by these enemies was to them a total disgrace. But their morale was instantly raised up, and supported by the healing spells from the mountain, the magical beasts' attacks became more coordinated. It wasn't that Long Hao-chen hadn't thought about commanding these magical beasts with Yating's help, but in these circumstances, this would obviously not show very good results. This was because he was absolutely not familiar with these magical beasts, not knowing about their specialities let alone their names. If he really commanded them, the group of magical beasts would perhaps become even more confused. Thus, what he could do was only to give these magical beasts a healing support and to raise their morale. On the other side, Chen Yinga had at some point sat on the ground, with a little pigment doll sitting on her lap. The girl and the beast seemed to be communicating over something, and immediately, Chen Yinga took out some huge magical crystals, placing them in front of McDull. McDull appeared somewhat surprised, but quickly made up his resolve under Chen Yinga's encouragement. Watching those magical crystals that were clearly at the 7th rank, he shut his eyes. Zhong Fangfang also joined the ranks of the healers, only, his healing spells were honestly speaking, far from reaching Han Yu's level. After all, he had in his own team a specialized healer, and didn't need to give much investment to the field of healing as a guardian knight. However, he was after all a powerhouse at the peak of the 6th step, and was still capable of a simple great recovery technique. Though large-scale healing spells were unfamiliar to him, single-targeted ones weren't. His series of great recoveries were aimed at the rather severely wounded magical beasts, and gave support to the magical beasts beside Yating and Han Yu's large-scale healing. With their help as well as the news that Yi Xiaolei was sealed, the magical beasts forcibly held back the 8 charging demons. In particular, the large-scale healing abilities being of light element, their effects were no different from offensive spells in the demon's eyes. Although it was unable to inflict real wounds to these demons, it still had the effect of weakening Arbao's boosting spell that all his allies benefited from. Long Haochen gave a glance to the sky, before looking at Yi Xiaolei next, hardening his inner determination and resolve. This wasn't his first time commanding a battle that could be said to reach the scale of war, but this time was clearly the most dangerous. In case Arbao's group of 8 reached them, it would be hard to say for how long they would be able to resist. At least for now their strength was still way far from their grasp. This video will end here. Thank you for watching.